Welcome to the Mindful Healers podcast with Dr. Jessie Mahoney
and Dr. Ni-Cheng Liang.
We are physicians and leaders who are also trained in coaching, yoga, mindfulness, and integrative medicine.
We are also mothers, spouses, sisters, daughters, aunts, and friends.
In this podcast, we share candid, heart-centered, loving, science-based, thoughtful, and often fun conversations about the challenges life throws at us.
With our collective experience of over 30 years in physician and personal wellness, we reflect and offer pearls of wisdom for navigating life's challenges with more ease.
From parenting, marriages, money scarcity, cancer survivorship, uncertainty, challenges in practicing medicine, we cover it all.
We invite you to refresh your perspective and empower yourself with mindset, mindfulness, and other well-being tools that actually work. A quick reminder that nothing in our podcast is medical advice.
Welcome to our episode with special guest, Dr. Holly MacKenna. She is a board-certified physician in integrative medicine as a fellow alumnus of the University of Arizona Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine program, and also board-certified in psychiatry with additional certifications in the Helms auricular acupuncture and non-touch and distance Reiki. Welcome, Dr. MacKenna.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So today's podcast was inspired actually by a comment that you made in this multidimensional physician group about our retreat. And it caught my attention because you said something that I so believe in, but don't often say out loud. And it's this idea of learning so much without realizing it. And that was the best way to learn. So the intention of our podcast today is to talk about learning so much without realizing it and exploring this idea also of coaching and mindfulness as ways of learning and ways of thinking and what they mean.
Takeaways include that we hope you'll gain insights and see what surprises you and inspires you in this conversation with Holly, what touches your heart, and hopefully you decide to embrace or recommit to this work with lots of different opportunities ripe for experiential learning.
So we wanted to share a bit about Holly's background and unique perspective on mindfulness and mindset work as a psychiatrist, and also a bit about designing an intentional integrative practice, which is something that many people that I work with and many people who listen to the podcast are interested in weaving some of this into their work and or making it the focus of their work. So I'm wondering if you would share a bit about what you do now in your practice and a bit about your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been traditionally trained in psychiatry and practicing for about 20-ish years. I graduated from my residency training like a couple days after Hurricane Katrina. So I'm here in New Orleans, and that's where I trained. Met a local, got married to a local, so stayed here. And probably about a decade or so in, I really started embracing more of an integrative type practice. I'm one who discovered mindfulness and meditation when I was in college. A good friend was a Buddhist monk, and so I studied with him and with folks there. And that was in and out of my life. And I realized over time, the more in my life it was, the better off and the more well I was as a person and just as a spirit. So I was at the VA for about 11, 12 years before opening my own practice, which I've had for the past 5 years. And while there, I developed what folks who are familiar with the VA know as the Whole Health Program. I work closely with folks from Dr. Weil's fellowship who are now like in national positions there to develop one in New Orleans, which was and is quite successful as far as I know. It was quite successful when I was there. And that is really when I started more of an integrative practice. I happened upon Dr. Weil's fellowship after completing a more business side fellowship at Duke University, their Integrative Medicine and Fuqua School of Business have a leadership program that kind of teaches you the business side. So as a good VA employee, I was kind of trying to learn the business side, which ended up serving me later in my own practice. But that's when I really met a lot of folks who are graduates, and they told me, you are an integrative psychiatrist, like you are doing the work. You need to look at this fellowship. You need to formally join our community. And, with the help of scholarships and, all the generosity that Dr. Weil has around that fellowship, I was able to do that. And that's really what, in my mind, was the real catalyst for the change. I started that while I was still at the VA, kind of in leadership, trying to make things happen there. Quickly realized that I was growing faster than the organization was leaving space for my growth. My roots had gone out the bottom of the pot, and it was time to move on. So I started out kind of, like with a gentleman's handshake of I'll go part-time, I'll go down to like an eighth so I can keep my insurance, but will really have me work more, so that I can build my practice. And then, because this is how I live my best life, the pandemic hit New Orleans like a week after I opened my practice, and I went down to part-time. We had our first COVID case here. So the gentleman's handshake was out the window. Suddenly I had a practice and not a lot of work at the VA, paying me. I did have savings. But I was still in the fellowship, and I had that community, which I think is really important and part of what we're talking about today. Because I think without the support of my classmates from all over the world, I have classmates in Australia and Brazil and, all over the US, I probably would have given up and like gone back, tail between the legs to the VA. But instead, because I was here post Katrina and that affected my trajectory, I just started offering free care to first responders. And that's basically what I did for the first 6 months of my practice, because no one had money to pay me. They considered, as much as mental health was needed, and this was true post Katrina as well, or post any kind of big disaster, mental health is probably in the forefront and what people need the most, but people still have this feeling that it's a luxury item. And so it's not what people are wanting to put their dollar towards, even though in the long run, it's going to help them. And I think that's true of coaching as well. So I just did it for free. And that actually got the word out that I existed. Once things started freeing up and people started spending on themselves again and realizing they needed mental health care, people mentioned to me like, hey, I saw that news, story about you doing that, and I made a note of your name, and that's why I'm here. And the reason I mention that is I think a big part of following your trajectory and building a practice is to be true to what's your true north and what your heart is telling you. That felt right to me because of my story, because of my experience post Katrina, having the first responders be the ones that were there helping us. And that was my way of feeling like it came full circle and I could pay that back. I didn't do that like, oh, that'll get me on the news and get me like, business later. That business reasoning, I had a coach at the time, I still have him, who was helping me with the executive side of things. He is one that I'd met when I was with the Duke program, so I've known him for a long time. And he helped me look at those, it was about 6 months of not really making a lot of money or making any money, as a time to decide what my practice was going to look like and what was comfortable to me. And honestly, give myself permission to make my own rules. Because after working in organizational medicine for so long, I was so used to asking for permission and thinking, well, I can't do that. And I had a lot of unspoken rules in my head. I'm a recovering perfectionist, so I was always kind of thinking I had to ask, my like informal board of directors, my friends that I trusted and knew had my back, and they were there to give me answers until I've eventually evolved into realizing I have my own answers. But it took some time. So I think, when someone's developing a practice and they come to me about that, yes, I can tell them the ins and outs of like, oh, this is the best electronic health record, and this is how I charge. And I have a membership-based practice, which is super fun. And allows me to do the Reiki and do the extra things without having to nickel and dime people. All that is great, but I think what's most important is deciding what do you want your life to look like, big picture, like have a blank canvas, like give yourself permission for that. And then what do you want this part of your life? Because your practice isn't your whole life. Like, how can it fit into your life in a way that, for me personally, I don't have my small children taking my iPad away because I'm doing notes in the middle of the night. I mean, the thing that was funniest to me was we were far enough into the pandemic that, I was seeing patients again, and my now 12-year-old, so at that time, when she was like 8 or 9, said, "Mommy, how come you're a doctor when you don't work?" Because she didn't see me being at the hospital all the time and like stressing out all the time. I was actually relaxed, and I was still seeing people and doing the work, but I was actually enjoying it. And able to be present for her. And so for me, in her own little innocent way of saying that, that was pretty telling that, I was working, but it didn't look like I was working.
That's awesome. And you probably, I know from my own work now, and it's not that I'm not working and not that I'm not tired, but I often feel like I'm not working. Right. My family, the energy is different. I just wanted to reflect a couple things you said because they were so good. And one was that it's okay to work for free. And I do a lot of work for free. And again, it's the energy by which you're doing it. I do it for fun, right? I teach yoga for fun. I've been doing it for almost 5 years. And people are like, why don't you charge? And I was like, because I just enjoy it. It feels like the right thing to do. And it started as a pandemic giving back. This is something I can do in this crazy moment in the world. And so I think when we work for free because it's something that feels so important to us, and we have the space to do it, that I think often we have this idea that it's working for free is not okay. And in medicine, we're trying to speak up. But I think it's actually the sort of thought about what does it mean for you and what's the value and is it authentically you? It, of course, can benefit you in a business, but that's not why I do it. And it doesn't sound like that's why you did it. And that's what's different. And maybe why it works too, because it feels good. Really.
Yeah. Because I think it is the intention and energy behind it. Because people pick up on that, that it's something sincere, like your name comes up a lot for your yoga, like in different, internet circles. Well, and it's never like, and this, it's like, oh, she offers this amazing thing. This is someone you can follow.
Yeah. I love that. Well, and it's different than, say, a master class, right? Where it's like, come here, which is clearly the intent of like, come see what I offer. I always feel like it's the value you give. And for people who are listening, because many people who listen to us are thinking about starting something, I just wanted to call that out because we've often talked about don't work for free, but I think there are spaces in which it's super helpful. You also mentioned this idea that, oh my gosh, this resonates so deeply with me. That you were growing faster than your organization had space for, and like your roots coming out of the potted plant. I have this vision. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was me. And so I think for some people that visual might resonate, and it isn't, which I felt very strongly. The VA is not a bad place. Where I came from, Kaiser is not a bad place. They're doing amazing things, but I had outgrown my pot, and that's such a beautiful vision because I think we feel like we have to hate it or not like it, or there has to be a toxic environment for us to leave. And it doesn't have to be. You could have just outgrown your pot, which we never blame a plant for outgrowing the pot or the pot. So it felt so amazing. And there were two other things you said that I just feel really, as someone who's been on this trajectory, and I get those same calls, like, how do you do it? Give me the roadmap. And so, the permission to make your own rules, because there are no rules, and to follow I will translate what you said, to follow your heart. Like, what do you want your life to look like? You have your own answers. I can't give you the answers. You can hear how other people have done it, but so much of this work is inner work. And as you mentioned, working with a coach, right? Most of us who've done it got help. We didn't do it ourselves, but that help wasn't someone telling us what to do. That was someone helping us know what we wanted to do and helping us really actually maybe give ourselves permission and clarity about about what we wanted to do. So I couldn't not reflect on those. Oh, and the last one was the importance of community. And I want to just throw that out. Like, we know each other from the Mindful Healthcare Collective, and you and Nicheng know each other from the Arizona Integrative Medicine program. And I think that we often discount that importance of community in medicine. We're really taught to do it on our own, and being in community, there might be a risk there. They might not have your own back. And like, to step out on your own is not to disregard all community. It's actually to lean into community and find your people farther afield. In my experience, they're usually people all across the country, or maybe even across the world, as you're doing something that hasn't been done before. But to encourage people that those are sort of the spaces, and to create community, right? You joined different communities. I do a program called Transition Well. It's the same thing. It's like, create a community. And that was because I couldn't find community. I was like, okay, well, I'll create it, because people need this, and it didn't exist. And it's very hard to do things on your own. So I wanted to mention all of those thoughts. Nicheng, do you have thoughts?
Yeah.
Yeah, just that the Mindful Healthcare Collective, speaking about working for free, when it's mission aligned for you, and when you're aligned with your own values surrounding that work, then, as both of you have said, it doesn't feel like work. That giving to the community, what you receive, and that service like fills the cup. And so it doesn't feel like work. And that's, I think, really where the Mindful Healthcare Collective was born, out of this obvious emerging need for well-being resources in the midst of a pandemic that was going to significantly decrease the well-being of the healers around the country and the world. So thank you, both of you, for exemplifying that. And then also, Holly, I wanted to reflect upon the trajectory of finding your own way and making up your own rules, or basically getting rid of all the rules. With my eldest, I also had been re-pivoting. Like, I'm pivoting many, many times. But more recently, I've been in my reparenting era, and I'm not necessarily in clinic as much. And so my eldest asked me just pretty recently, a couple weeks ago, and they were like, "Mom, is everything okay? Because you're here like all the time." So it was just like testament to the intention when we give ourselves permission to be present in facets of life that we prioritize.
The other thing I want to reflect on for both of you is that you might have both been present before, but you were distracted. So you had your charts, or you were under pressure. And so not only are you physically present, both of you have done the work to be very intentionally mentally present. And as the pediatrician in me is like, kids notice that instantly. They feel it, as do you. But what a beautiful shift for both of you.
And the last thing I'll say about all of the nuggets of wisdom that you just shared with us, Holly, is this community. So like, I feel like my worlds are colliding right now. Like, I know both of you from different spheres, and how lovely it is to combine and grow community and have them merge, and just the ripple effects are endless. So gratitude to both of you for now being part of one community.
So I thought we'd pivot to talking about your experience. You came to the Connect in Nature retreat, and in particular, this comment about realizing you learned so much without having intentionally set this intention to learn. And to me, actually, as I even offer that question, that's the value of a retreat, right? We often think of it as a vacation, but it's so different than a vacation, although it feels amazing. But that we can learn so much experientially, and it's learning in a different way. You're actually absorbing it. It's not school learning where you have a PowerPoint, or these days, internet learning where people are using YouTube and all these other things. My son just was visiting last night and he was talking about, oh, you just watch this thing here, you know, linear algebra in college. And I'm like, what? Like, that is so different than the way that I like to learn. It doesn't mean, I think there are lots of different ways to learn, but I was curious about if you just could reflect on your experience and that comment.
Yeah, I mean, part of, I think what's attracted me to the type of practice I have and just my life where it is now is that it is embracing more of like that feminine energy. Because I think traditional, at least in my experience, traditional medicine is very kind of go, 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 do the labs, do the tests, do the things. And I know niching, like in your specialty, that's very important. I don't want to discount that. But when you're so much in that doing energy, it doesn't allow a lot of space for being. And in my experience, the being is where the magic happens. The being is where the healing happens. And I think our CMEs and our learning that we are given and told is the way to be in medical school, in residency, and then as grown-up doctors and our CMA experiences are like what you're talking about, Jessie, like that, oh, here's, you know, I'm taking all the notes and, you know, I'll probably never look at these notes again, but I feel like I have to write down everything that's being said. And like, what did that slide say? Let me take a picture. And, you know, it's so distracted. And so I personally end up missing half of the things because I'm so busy trying to write it down. I just, by chance, my medical school experience, I went to Wake Forest, like when they had a pilot program of having it be just problem based. So we had like small groups and we would get a case at the beginning of the week and we would go, you know, we would come up with learning objectives and like go away, research things, bring it back to the group. Like it was like a 3-day over the week kind of experience. And then, you know, we had like labs and things like that too. But that's always been kind of more of my learning style is the doing and the being and the allowing space for absorbing. And so that's really what was reflected in this retreat. Like you're literally amongst these amazing trees that are just like offering their systems of support and roots and shade and knowledge with wind and all of that Mother Nature can provide you as far as support and love and learning. And then you're experiencing support and love and learning in just different ways, whether it be through a yoga practice, through that somatic practice was super helpful for me, through listening to, you know, the bees in the garden, you know, smelling the flowers, noticing the flowers, smiling at your neighbor as you're passing by in silence, doing these things. Like all of these things, like changed my pathways without me even realizing it. I could just feel all the little, you know, neurodiversity in my brain without my multicolored pens and my highlighters and my, you know, copious notes. I did find myself, you know, you guys gave us and I loved it. It wasn't even a big journal. It was like here's a journal for this experience, which I actually really loved. I don't know if that was intentional, but it was, I love that. But just allowed me to kind of reflect things as they'd come up versus, oh, I got to write that down because that's, you know, there's going to be a CME on it. But for me, it was more of when I talk about energies with my patients, like more of that divine feminine energy, more of that being energy, more of that allowing yourself space to be and to heal versus the running around and the feeling like you have to check all the boxes. For me, this time in my life, this space that I'm in, this growth that I've made, that resonates much more. I mean, I haven't been to like a traditional conference. The closest I get is with Dr. Andy, but even then, like they intertwine like enough being that I can like get over the lectures. But I just can't, like, it's just my energy doesn't tolerate that anymore. I don't know if it ever did. I think I've just been more true to myself to realize that it doesn't.
I love that. So I'm curious, what kinds of things did you learn? Or the things maybe that you remember now? Like, I bet a month ago you would say something different. So I realize now we're in a different season actually than we were when you did the retreat, but what's stuck?
What really stuck for me was honestly, like, I can think back to it now. We had this lovely experience of going to the redwoods and having this yoga experience, and the calmness of that space, and just the awe, the first time I ventured into mindfulness, I kind of alluded to this earlier. I was studying abroad in Ireland. My mom's best friend's son is a Buddhist monk. So I, and we'd known each other since we were kids. So I, met up with him. He's like, "Oh, I'm doing this thing." I'm like, "Okay, let me check it out." And the minute I walked into their meditation space, I just had this calmness. And I'd come from a space of a lot of chaos and just needing to do a lot of self-work that I hadn't started yet. And so being in, and it was actually in the area which they labeled as like the cathedral. Was it the cathedral tree? You guys could tell me because you're in that over there more. Yeah. That just felt, I don't know if there's Native American like ceremony that happened there, but I felt I don't know if heavy is the right word, but like a stronger energy. Like I just felt drawn to that energy, and very connected to the trees. And I noticed that a lot, all of our community folks were stopping and kind of like just touching trees and like listening and being present, in a different type of way. So that definitely stuck with me. Mother Nature kind of nodding to us with the buck coming through. We had a deer come through, after our experience, after we shared our energy back to the trees in this beautiful yoga experience. It's like, they were like, "Thank you, here we are." That will stay with me until, for this entire lifetime. The being in the garden was really something that it was more of a reminder of how much that space fulfills me and how much that grounds me. That's something, at the end of our time together, we all talked about things we always say to our patients. And something that I always say, I didn't say it then because someone had said it similarly, so I changed what I was going to say, but is that just 20 minutes outside will lower your stress hormones, will, if you do it before noon during circadian light, will help you sleep better. If you add exercise, it'll help your brain health and help with, I see a lot of folks with traumatic brain injuries, to help with memory. And that time outside with that, led mindfulness space was a great reminder of how much I enjoy just sitting on my porch or just sitting in the garden. I'm not an active gardener. I'm one that like, give me something that isn't hard to like keep alive gardener, but I do enjoy the space. And I come from a line, Irish people love to garden. So I come from like a line of gardeners. Like if you go to Ireland, you can't, like everyone's looking at their gardens because it's just the type of climate that has beautiful gardens. But that was that just drew me in a way that I didn't expect. I knew it would be fun, but it was like a different kind of experience. Sitting on the beach when that was another kind of morning experience that we had, just like observing did we decide they were seals or what did we decide they were? Were they seals or were they,
I think they're seals.
Yeah, they were seals. Yeah. And so watching them like with the waves kind of moving them, and they still stayed together as a community. Again, I felt like that was Mother Nature kind of nodding to us and being like, "This is you guys." Like we had literally formed this little pack, this little community of folks who connected in ways that none of us, I think, expected. And then there was this group of seals like hanging out together in these waves, and they just all stayed as a pack. Despite, whatever kind of crash came through them, they stayed together, they supported each other. And so I felt like that was a beautiful reminder of, again, like community and how important that is. Like we've been talking about, like leaning into community when you feel alone, creating it if you feel like there isn't one there for you. Because, we are, what's me is us is all. Like if I'm experiencing it, someone else is as well, and they're needing it too. So, bringing that in, maybe you're the one meant to create it. honestly, Jessie, you just did such a beautiful job of like bringing in, quote unquote, I'm doing the quote marks for those who aren't watching, coaching.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've said before that like I'm not necessarily one that's like a big fan of coaching, even though I have like a million coaches. Just because I come from like the mental health space, and sometimes there's some muddiness there for people who aren't maybe as well trained and just kind of call themselves coaches. But you brought in a lot of leaning into curiosity, which was super helpful for me because especially now I have a daughter who's turning into a teen, and it's starting to make her own decisions. Here in New Orleans, she's at an age where we have to choose high schools, and there's a big process. And she's 12, so like making those kind of choices at this age just seems really like odd and different. And fortunately, she has wonderful middle school teachers who told us at the beginning of the year, like, hey, I know you want to email me the thing. You need to encourage your student to come talk to me about the thing. And she reminds me of that. But, so leaning into when I'm having those feelings, going in with curiosity was a real nugget that I got from this, kind of sneaky coaching that happened of rather than, kind of going in, with my recovering perfectionist self, thinking it has to be like my experience. And if it's not, it's wrong. Instead, leaning into like, why am I uncomfortable with this? What is it about this? What is this challenging me as a mother, challenging me as a woman, as like a fellow woman to the young woman I'm helping develop into that space. What can I learn from this? What is she teaching me? That's been super helpful for me as a mom and as a healer, because I find myself in those spaces with patients every day. But, sometimes, and then when, we all have our rough days where we're not the most perfect healer. And having that space of when I'm having maybe a day that I didn't have enough coffee or something, leaning into the curiosity instead of the crabbiness.
I love that. I love that. And we were talking before we started recording a little bit about this coaching space. And even as a coach, I sometimes bristle at the word because I think of maybe it's become a thing in the world. And I hear a lot of people saying, well, I don't want to do coaching, or this particular comment you were commenting about was someone was looking for a retreat, but they did not want coaching. And so what I think is interesting is that there are so many ways to do it and ways to approach it. And I often talk on the podcast about how I bring in mindfulness, but it's not just that. It's sort of your approach and your style. And I'm going to get back to the free work. It's the intent behind it and the sort of authenticity behind it. And so on the one hand, it makes me sad that people just blanket say that it's not helpful, because as you and I know, who both have coaching, it is helpful. And nobody would say that like a sports coach is not helpful. So it's maybe just leaning into curiosity around the word and having more clarity about what you're looking for help/support about. And I just loved that you commented on that, and that I often call it surreptitious coaching, right? Because even my yoga has coaching and mindset work in it, because when you're relaxed, you absorb it. Or when you're, doing group work amidst the trees, well, yes, technically I have a lot of coach training, but it's not a specific, outcomes-based coaching or someone telling you what to do. That's not what coaching is. And many people, I think, have confusion about what coaching is. I also have a little bit, and I just like to be super vulnerable here, like psychiatrists probably hate coaches and therapists hate coaches because these lines, as you said, are kind of muddy. And to me, it's about the sort of honesty and transparency about what you help with, and very clearly in my case, what I don't help with, right? This is what I help with. This is what I don't help with. And I think that the frustration in a lot of minds is there isn't clarity about that.
Yeah, I love to partner with coaches in my practice, just like on that side of things. I work closely with an integrative nutritionist, and she does a lot of coaching. She has a background that is trauma informed, like she's worked in eating disorders units and things like that. And so she and I have been able to partner with folks who have a lot of trauma around food, which has affected their gut and and then I'm working on the trauma side of things. And And honestly, without her as part of how I do things, I don't know that I could do it. And then I work close with physical therapists, and it's like you're saying, like they also do a different type of coaching work. They wouldn't call themselves coaches, but they're, especially the ones I work with, are doing a lot of pelvic floor work, and that's again very trauma informed, and a lot of relearning your body, or maybe learning it for the first time, and releasing trauma, the trauma, pain, and dealing with that as it comes up on my side. Um, and then I work with psychologists who I love and adore. I was in training analysis for years and years and years until I just couldn't sustain it. So I've been, and I said this to you both, like I've done a lot of work in therapy myself on my own trauma. I've done rituals around my generational trauma. I don't feel that I could have gotten as much out of the coaches I have now. I have 2 active coaches now, and I've had multiple other coaches in the past. I don't think I could get as much work done with their help and partnership as I could have if I hadn't done the intensive work that I did before this. Yeah, I think it would have been just like kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall. Like it would have been like, does it stick? Does it not? And I see that cross my path a lot with folks. Like, oh, I'll just give you the money and maybe it'll fix me. But if you're not engaging in the work, it's wasted money. So, yeah.
It's hard.
Jane, do you have thoughts on this? I'm so curious. I feel like your perspective is going to be different than either of ours.
It's hard work, right? So I've had coaches before in the past. I currently don't have an active coach right now, but I still see my therapist who's been helping me through some residual from postpartum OCD and postpartum anxiety. And even when quote unquote things are in a flow state or going well, the maintenance of that mental health is also really important to prioritize. So like just because things are going like pretty well and you don't have any big catastrophes or big fires going on doesn't mean that you can't continue to support your mental health. So right now I'm actively still seeing my therapist of now many years. And I wanted to reflect back, Holly, with what you shared about your integrative practice, because you have built a healing network that holds space for your patients in ways that are unique and whole health centered. So mind, body, and spirit. And I wanted to reflect on an analogy with the forest. So like we're all kind of like individual trees in a forest, and the coaches and the other integrative practitioners that we partner with have formed a community and this network. So like we are all part of this massive healing network that has roots. So all of the trees have individual roots, but our roots are intertwining and supporting each other and holding each other up and reminding us that the redwood tree's roots are really not that deep, but because the network is so vast, while it's shallow, it's still so, so strong. So I just wanted to bring that imagery to mind.
And adding the imagery that there's no pots, right? The redwood trees just keep going. There's tons of room. Keep going.
No pots for the
in spite of like the little trails, which I just
Yes, exactly. They're just
like, I'm just going to go around it.
Yeah, the redwood tree's roots are unapologetically vast and wide and far-reaching. Yeah. So another nod to being more tree as part of an intention. Another thing, Holly, that you mentioned that I also really want to highlight, because I think it can be applicable to anything that we face in life, not just parenting a soon-to-be teen, which I'm in the throes of as well. Well, now I have an official teenager and high schooler, but getting curious about discomfort. I think that's so important for navigating life in general, whether it be as a healer, as a parent, as a loved one, as a friend. Oftentimes there is a reaction to the discomfort, which has been hardwired in us, that doesn't necessarily serve us. But if we bring in the curiosity, that mindfulness piece about the discomfort, it opens up space.
So
Yeah,
beautiful.
and in the mental health world, we'll call it countertransference, and that's a big part of why any good therapist or psychiatrist is going to be involved in some type of mental health work themselves, because you do have to have that curiosity, like, why am I having this strong reaction to this person? And it's something about me, but there may be some energy that they're reflecting that I can use. Like, I say it in jest, but it's partially true. Like, I use my own like dysfunction to help others. Like, there's something that it's triggering in me that's information that I can use to then help them heal. And oftentimes, part of the beauty of what I do is it helps me heal as well, by helping change their narrative, maybe in a way that wasn't changed for me.
So talking about changing the narrative, can you share what you feel comfortable sharing about what has happened since the retreat? Like, have there been any shifts or changes that you've noticed?
Yeah, interestingly enough, since the retreat, I've partially because of a side gig, but I think also just the universe like provides if you pay attention. I got approved for like the compact multi-state licensure. So now I'm like licensed, although I don't have my malpractice yet. I'm licensed in like New Jersey, Ohio, Illinois, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. I was only the last two before. I'm in the process of like adding that malpractice. I'm just waiting for this quarter to end to do that. But while that was happening, I also just, maybe because of the curiosity, have realized I'm really drawn, and my practice is really meant for creatives. Like, it's really folks who see me and thrive are often in the space of perhaps having like a circadian based mental health concern or divergence. So, like someone who maybe is bipolar or has a cyclical mood disorder or has some type of neurodiversity. And those folks oftentimes don't feel great on traditional medicines. Now, I studied with Dr. Weil, so, and I've asked him directly, and I agree with him on this. Like, there's definitely a place for traditional medicines in, folks who have like a full bipolar or schizophrenia, or, that like you do need some version of traditional medication to manage those things. But I'm also of the school, having been trained by analysts and, studied DBT, that it's a spectrum, just as in sexuality, our mental health is a spectrum. So you can go from like having a single postpartum depression moment to having this full-fledged bipolar, and there's everything in between. And so not everyone needs to be on the full, heavy duty Depakote. Like, some folks, I can use supplements and use mind body medicine and help them manage themselves. And then others who maybe do need more traditional medicines, I've been able to really fine tune them in a way that they don't have to be on these levels of medicines that are going to cause metabolic syndromes and cause just a dulling of their creativity. So that's part of why I think creatives and I align so well. So I'm a creative myself. So I get it. I get the need to like, sometimes you want to be able to finish that painting or finish that writing or, deal with, do whatever it is that is feeding your soul. But we also need to keep you healthy so that you can sleep and maintain and, live your best life outside of that creative space. So that's something that has started evolving in me. And this is the first time I'm actually like saying it out loud fully. Like, I've acknowledged it, but it's been kind of simmering. So it's a seed that's been planted. I guess the roots are now taking hold a bit more because it's actually coming out of my mouth. So I feel like that, along with the multi-state licensure, the new year is going to bring some differences for how I'm practicing. I mean, I'm still going to be doing the Reiki. I'm still going to be doing the probably membership and things like that. But I think I'll be probably reaching out to different populations in a different kind of way that I am not aware of yet.
That's so exciting that the ripple effects are going beyond state boundaries, and it's very intentional.
I love that.
Yeah. And I mean, I do now do consultations across state lines. I'm a malpractice that I'm allowed to do that as long as I don't prescribe. So like, that's the advantage of being integrative. But that's usually like, one time, or like I collaborate with a physician that's in that state, just depending on like what the person's needs are, what have you. Because I recognize I have a unique skill set, and, who am I to deny that? It's me being silly.
Help more people. Is there anything from the retreat specifically that you have or will pass on to your patients, and especially like the new network of patients across the country?
I mean, I think I love the alignment of the trees. I love that, I can feel connected to you, person, in San Francisco, person in San Diego, through this network of trees who are so connected. I love that like an urban forest is connected to a full forest through this root system that's sometimes caused havoc here in New Orleans because it likes to go where it goes, but it gets there. Anyone who's walked on our streets can see how our oak trees like to move things for their benefit, but that's fine because I love oaks. So I love that. I love that the connections of folks that I've made, even with these storms that have come through in the Gulf, I've had folks that I've met through the retreat who reached out to me just to make sure I was doing okay. In a really sincere and lovely way. And those are ripples that like are hard to verbalize, but that it's making changes and that there's energy shifting. And we're, still kind of realizing them in real time.
And is there anything for our listeners that you'd like for them to know about if they happen to be curious about the retreat?
I went by myself. I was blessed because you guys helped me get there. But I left my kids behind. My husband has a job that is a lot of travel. So as I said to him, I was like, well, it's your turn. So he was home with the kids for the long weekend. I had not, I'd never driven over the Golden Gate Bridge. I am about to buy a hybrid because I rented a hybrid and I loved it. I only had to pay $5 for gas. It was great. But I'd never, like I've traveled on my own, but oftentimes I'm going to like, a retreat in Tucson with like my fellow fellowship mates, or, I've gone to like, places where I know the person teaching, or I know, or I have some familiarity. This was one I knew you guys, but it was, I really didn't have like a pal, but it was okay. And it was actually in a lot of ways better because I feel like sometimes when you have a pal, it's distracting, like you're not as present. So I would say if you're at all curious, lean into that curiosity and allow yourself space to learn in a different type of way, to really feel the connections with other humans. I'm just drawn to the memory of like crying with a fellow doctor after hearing their story, and then feeling pulled to share some of my own story in a way that I think helped them process theirs. And that's not stuff that's just going to happen in a Facebook group. Like that's only going to happen when you're sitting amongst the trees and doing yoga and eating, food that was grown and picked that morning, and just having space for it. And there's a lot of magic in that.
That's beautiful. So I want to thank you for coming and joining us. So many pearls of wisdom in this conversation. And just to reflect for our listeners, we mentioned a number of things today that are in previous podcasts, and I might not have them all, but Nicheng, you mentioned the reparenting podcast, and I think it's really worth going back. If that like caught your attention, you should listen to it. And then the Be More Tree podcast, which came out recently, inspired by the retreat. And as both of us said, maybe not our best work because it was done just like that, right? We were like, we should do this right now. And we were on the back end of the retreat tired, but worth putting out there. And I've actually gotten several emails about how great it was. So it's funny how harshly we judge ourselves. But listen to the Be More tree, because I think it's really cool. And a lot of the things that we alluded to today are discussed more fully in that podcast. And then we've mentioned many times today the Mindful Healthcare Collective. So I just want to remind people you can join us. It's a Facebook group, but you can also sign up for emails and you get invitations to my yoga as well as invitations to the retreat. But we offer a lot of interesting stuff. And so if you haven't signed up to be a part of that, Nicheng, can you give what's the link?
Yes, it's mindfulhealthcarecollective.com.
Okay, just didn't want to mess it up. And then just a quick nod that Nicheng and I do this retreat once a year. We're going to do it next year. We're tweaking it slightly. And I think we'll be doing it in the spring to bring in the wildflowers and a different season. We did a couple in the summer. We did this one in the fall. And I think we're going to do the spring next year because we like variety and we're curious about that season. And so sign up for the Mindful Healthcare Collective or my emails so you know when to sign up. I was very sad. Someone said in the Facebook group that they didn't know it was happening and they really wished they had more notice. And so I don't know how else to tell people, but if you're listening now, if you're on those lists, then you'll know when it's happening. And we will share in the podcast once we have the date and confirmed. So, and in the meantime, you can join me for retreats. I do a lot of other retreats, longer retreats that are 4 nights, 5 nights, and we all stay together, and they're much smaller than that retreat. So again, I love variety. It keeps me interested. And I think that also humans love variety. And most people come to those retreats alone. I think it's so interesting what you said, because so many people are like, well, I want to wait for my friend to come and they can't come then. And they put it off and put it off. And the people I see get really not, I won't say the most benefit. You can get benefit either way, but it's worth coming and trying something on your own, which I think for many of us is dipping a toe into something a little bit uncomfortable. And so encouraging people to do that. I also do a 1-day retreat called Honoring Diastole. At this point, there isn't one until the spring. It was just last weekend, but it's another kind of a different experience. I have lots of listeners to the podcast who have come to all 3 because they're checking them all out, and sort of some you can bring different people to. So paying attention to that. And if our conversation about coaching was appealing, just reach out to me. There's lots of ways to engage in that at a retreat or on Zoom. And many people are like, well, which is better? That's our doctor mind. Neither's better. It's where you're at and what works for you in the moment. And I think if you have preconceived notions about coaching, first of all, I would say email me because I like talking about it. And I think just maybe being curious about, could it help you? And what might help you? One thing we didn't mention that I think is really worth mentioning is if you reach out to me about coaching and I think you need Holly or I think you need a therapist, I absolutely tell people that. Like, I think that's the beauty actually of having a physician coach. I'm like, oh no, this is not my area. And maybe that's not true universally of coaches, but I firmly believe that, you need to be in the mind space where you can get benefit. And so just understanding that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means that like there's a whole network, just like the trees, and this tree might be the tree that you need first or second, or you need both trees at the same time. So Holly, do you have any final words of wisdom? And then if people happen to live in any of those states where you can help them, how do they find you?
So to find me, my website is, my practice website is Dara, Dara, Wellness, NOLA, NOLA. That's New Orleans, Louisiana, what NOLA stands for, .com. Dara is Irish for oak. So New Orleans, as I said, is full of oak trees, but so was Ireland, which is where my roots originate. So that's why my practice is called Dara Wellness. I also have hollymckenna.md.com, just as like my general website. I've been working on a children's book with my daughter that I'm hoping to get traditionally published. If not, we'll just like throw it out there, but that'll be there. I think, again, just kind of leaning in and back to like my favorite trees, allowing yourself to feel the strength of your roots that keep you centered, keep you on this earth, recognizing the strength of your trunk, your sense of self, and then allowing for the wind to blow through your branches and your leaves and move in space, knowing that you have that solid foundation and it's okay if there's a little wind.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much, Holly, for being here with us and sharing all of the gold nuggets of wisdom. So for you, dear listener, please stay on after the sound of the singing bowl for our mindful moment offering, and it will be led by Dr. Holly MacKenna. Thank you again, Holly.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us.
We encourage you to dive into the show notes for each episode for more learnings and resources.
We also invite you to take a listen to the many other Mindful Healers podcast episodes, and please share the podcast far and wide with colleagues, friends, and family.
If our message and approach resonate with you, we would love to work with you.
When you listen to a podcast, you consume information, but when you work with us, you can actually practice and change.
We offer coaching and mindfulness experiences, talks, workshops, retreats, and more. Connect with us at themindfulhealerspodcast.com.
The content of this podcast is not medical or life advice. We invite you to participate in the mindful moments we offer at the end of most of our podcasts, but please only do so safely.
Hello, this is Dr. Holly MacKenna, and I welcome you to this mindful moment. I invite you to sit with me for just this moment, having an awake spine, feet flat on the ground, touching the earth. And let's just take this breath together, breathing in through your nose and exhaling through your mouth. Allowing your eyes to close if you're comfortable and feeling safe, or holding a soft gaze if that's what's fitting you today. Inhaling again and exhale. And one last inhale and exhale. Bringing your attention to your feet on the earth. Feeling that connection with Mother Earth as she supports you. Allowing yourself to feel connected to all the living beings in this part of your universe. You feel the energy of your feet reaching into the earth as if it was a root system, reaching towards the other entities, the trees, the plants, the flowers, all surrounding you as you are a mighty oak. Your roots are growing and strengthening, allowing you to feel fully connected to those around you. You offer energies into the earth, thanking her for her support. And likewise, you feel the energies of those who support you, your root system, your ancestors, your family, your loved ones, your chosen family. Their love, their support, their energy being shared and rising up through your root chakra into your solar plexus, your sense of self. And you notice your awake spine is suddenly feeling stronger, enhanced by rings of growth. Your trunk has become strong and resilient, able to support you through the ebbs and flows of life. Above that trunk in your heart space, green moss growing in the center of your tree, from the space where all the branches outreach into the sky. There's still space held for more growth, for more support, for more love. That green light is a moss growing on your tree, and you notice a little green springling coming up, a mini tree perhaps growing from your center core, from your heart space, from your love, from your giving space. That love that doesn't just outreach through your branches, but also stays within and surrounds you, that green light that you feel. The green light that surrounds you, full of love and support, coming from your root system, but also coming from within. Just notice that. Allow yourself to breathe into that and feel that warmth. You may notice some sunlight that's catching through onto your green space from the sun above, from spirit, from the universe, offering support from above as your root system offers from below. And moving up, noticing those branches that reach out, some thick and strong, almost as thick as your trunk, reaching to the other trees around you, to the other spirits, the others who you love and adore, some you have never met, but you feel the need to reach out to and to offer your support to, your protection, your strength that they can use to climb, perhaps reaching down and offering them a way up to join you in this space, this freedom, this awe. Noticing the smaller branches that come off of your larger branches and reaching into the sky, some with acorns that will eventually green and fall to the forest bed below. Little seeds that you are dropping, sometimes knowingly, sometimes not. Allowing that ripple effect to others who will grow in the light of your branches and be inspired by your strength. Just breathe in, knowing that that happens daily, whether you recognize it or not. It's always happening. Your strength is always being recognized. Your green heart space is always being admired. And there's always someone wanting to reach up into your branches and climb. Feeling the rustle of your leaves as the breeze comes through. Your smaller branches sway. It tickles. It's nice sometimes when growth allows you to ebb and flow with what comes through. Sometimes you need to bend. You don't have to break. Allowing yourself to feel the strength of your roots, the strength of your trunk, and the strength of the mightier branches as those smaller branches reach out and grow. Reach towards the sky, towards the sun, towards the universe, towards spirit offering its support, its energy source, its inspiration. Is that a bird settling in your leaves, growing its own family in your branches? Perhaps it's an animal that is recognizable to you that's in your branches or at your root, an animal that has some type of meaning towards you, that perhaps recognizes you as someone it knew in this lifetime, or one in the past, or someone you'll know in the future. It may be a wise one offering you some guidance. Allow that to come forth, or just allow yourself to enjoy its play. You're there to offer that support, to allow it to offer what it needs to and what you need to hear in this moment. And you're mightier for it. Oh, reaching out to the sun, the joy, recognizing this sense of self is within you all the time, for you are a mighty oak in this moment and in the next, and in one's several after. Breathe this in, knowing this space is always available to you. It's always within you. And I invite you to feel that energy coming down from the sun through your leaves, through your smaller branches, through those larger branches, into that heart space, through your mighty trunk that's stronger by the moment, and into your roots, and adjusting that out into those who love you and need it as well. Feeling your feet back on Mother Earth, feeling your spine, feeling your body, allowing yourself to be back into this human form, ready to go out and hug the oaks and thank them for offering their energy to you. Noticing your breath, coming back into this space. When you're ready, you can start moving those little feet, no longer roots, although they're still there reaching. Move your branches that are now arms, and slowly open your eyes. I hope that serves you, my loves. And I hope this mindful moment will stay with you throughout the day. Sending love. It's Dr. Holly. Goodbye.